All right, welcome back to the Fray Podcast. My name is Austin Gregory, and I'm your host. And in this episode, we're going to start off a new series going through the book of Daniel. Now, if you've been listening recently, we've been doing hot take series. We're going to continue doing episodes like that. I just want to also, if you know about that series, you know I'm using it kind of as a way to have fun with the podcast, but also work on some communication skills because I have hopes and plans to plant a church in Nashville, Georgia. And communication's key to planting a church. With saying that, I also want to kind of get back in this rhythm of teaching the Bible. That is something I really love doing. I have fun doing it. But since I've left my role as a youth pastor at a church, I haven't really had the opportunity to teach in a while, and I love it, and I want to get better at it, and I don't want to go too long without, working out that muscle. And so this is going to be a chance for me to play around with teaching the Bible again and just having fun diving into the text and give you a resource to grow each week. And so we are going to dive into Daniel chapter 1. Now, Daniel is a book that you may be familiar with. I'm sure there's some VeggieTales movie made on that character of the Bible. But if you don't know, the kind of big staple moment for the book of Daniel is his entrance into the lion's den. Growing up in the church that I grew up in, one of the Sunday school classrooms for the kids actually was painted with Daniel and the lion's den on the walls. So every week you walked into literally the lion's den, and you sing Daniel praying and lions sleeping in the corner. It was a cool way to kind of remember those stories as you get older. But the book of Daniel is way cooler than what I was led to believe as a kid. He's actually maybe one of my favorite characters in the Bible, because time and time again you just see his faithfulness, you see his courage to stand out and be different in a culture and society that he was always going to be an outcast in. He was always going to be an outsider in. And so, with saying all that, I kind of want to just dive into a little bit of Daniel and set up the context for what this book is going to be about, and kind of pose some questions at the end that I think we all need to wrestle with as we begin this study through the book of Daniel, and as we begin to take a look at our own lives and where we stand at in this world. So I'm going to start off verse 1, chapter 1. It says, "In the third year of the reign of King Jehoiakim of Judah, King Neb of Babylon came to Jerusalem and laid siege to it." Now I'm going to pause right there because that's important. If you go back to 2 Kings 24, you're going to read a little bit about what's the historical context of this. And essentially, the king of Babylon, this is his first year, King Neb, is attacking Jerusalem. Jerusalem has a king called King Jehoiakim. I don't even know if I'm pronouncing this right, but the trick I learned in how to teach the Bible is to just speak it confidently. And so if you're reading along with me, and you're reading this out loud, or if you're going to take this and you're going to be like, I'm going to learn from Austin on the podcast, and then I'm going to go teach my friends. When you come across names like that, you just say it and act like you're saying it right, regardless of if you are. So, King Neb attacks the city of Jerusalem. He is also going to take a lot of things with him, and that's kind of the bare minimum foundation of what's going on in this book. Is you're going to see the aftermath of what happens when the king of Babylon, King Neb, takes from the city of Jerusalem. With saying that, the second verse I think is really key. So it says, "The Lord handed King Jehoiakim of Judah over to him, along with some of the vessels from the house of God." That's important because immediately you see this kind of historical atrocity take place. All right, there's an argument that the king of Judah, the king of this part of Israel, isn't a good guy. There's a reason why God is allowing this all to take place. And it's because the kings of Jerusalem are evil people in the sight of God. They've walked away from his presence. And when you walk away from God's presence, God says, okay, well, I'm not going to force you to be with me. But I'm going to remove my presence from you. I'm going to take everything good about me from you. Because you don't want me, but I don't think you realize what comes with me. You know? It'd be like a situation where, as a kid, you say, you know what, Mom, Dad, I'm done. I don't want to be with you. And they say, okay then. That means you don't get to be in our house. That's part of that's our thing. This house we own. So if you don't want anything to do with us, then you don't get to be in this house anymore. You don't get to eat out of our refrigerator anymore. You don't get to watch our Netflix subscription anymore. Right? All those good things that you've been enjoying from being in your parents' presence are stripped when you say, I don't want anything to do with you anymore. I think some of that's taking place. A lot of times in our lives, we think that when we leave God, we're leaving God for something better, but the reality is better lies with God. And so when you leave God, you're leaving better, and you're going to this unknown world of pain and destruction that you honestly were blessed to be guarded from before. And so that second verse where it says Yahweh handed King Joachim of Judah over to the king of Babylon, is key. It means God's in control. So in this historical atrocity where, the king, he opened that door up for God to remove his presence from him, you also are going to see that not everyone in Jerusalem is evil. Not everyone deserves what's about to take place. There's still historical atrocities taking place. There's still families getting ripped apart and people separated from the world they've always known. Innocent people their lives are at stake here. And so it's a dual reality of someone's being punished for how they are sinning against God, but also in the midst of that, people get caught in crosshairs, and you're having to wrestle with this tension of what happens when kings betray God. And so with saying all that, God's divine and the divine providence is taking place. God is in control of it all, even over the worst things that could happen to him and to his people. So the little note I wrote down was, we see God's providence over historic evil, and God is sovereign even over the worst that mankind has to offer. That's a truth we have to grapple with, is even when there's evil in this world, God is sovereign over it. He's in control. Ultimately, there's that you can rest in when things hit the fan. But then the last little bit that I want to cover before we end this episode, and we'll save the rest for another episode, is verses 3 through 7. Now, I'm not going to read all of it. Maybe I will. I don't know. I'm also reading out the CSB version, if you don't know and you're trying to read along. But verses 3 through 7, I think, set us up really nicely for the context of the rest of this book. This is essential for you to know as you dive into the book of Daniel, because it really paints a picture of the tension that lies at the heart of it. So the king ordered Ashpenaz, his chief eunuch, to bring some of the Israelites from the royal family and from the nobility, young men without any physical defect, good-looking, suitable for instruction in all wisdom, knowledge, perceptive, and capable of serving in the king's palace. Meaning, the king, King Neb, is pulling people from Israel who are the best and brightest. He's not getting, your people like me, right? Your C students. He's getting your A+ students, top of the line, in good peak physical condition. He's getting those young men, and he's bringing them into his royal court. All right, and it continues on saying, and at the end of verse 4, he was to teach them the Chaldean language and literature. The king assigned them daily provisions from the royal food and from the wine that he drank. They were to be trained for 3 years, and at the end of that time they were to attend the king. Among them, from the Judites, were Daniel, Hanani, Mishael, and Azariah. The chief eunuch gave them names. He gave the name Belshazzar to Daniel, Shadrach to Hananiah, Meshach to Mishael, and Abednego to Azariah. Now, even in the names, there's a complex web of things going on there. Essentially, Hebrew boys, which is what Daniel and his friends are, their names all had some reflection of who their God was in it. Right? Their identity, what their life was defined by in their names, was defined by the God that they worshipped. So when King Neb takes these boys with him, and he puts them in his royal palace, and his mission is to retrain them in the ways of the Babylonians, he's also going to start off by giving them a new identity. He's going to strip their names, the names of God, from them, and he's going to give them Babylonian names, names that represent the gods of Babylon. So, that is a lot of the tension that we're seeing here. Something that I thought of, this comes from Practicing the Way by John Mark Comer. Really solid book if you need a book that you want to dive into. But he says, I think this is the introduction. This isn't even like the start. This is at page 1 of the book. But he says, who are you following? Everybody is following somebody, or at least something. Put another way, we're all disciples. The question isn't, am I a disciple? It's who or what am I a disciple of? End quote. The reason he's saying that, that's bad for audio. The reason he's saying that is because we cannot buy into this lie that we are just these beings floating around and we are the products of our own choices and decisions. The reality is there's other things at play that make us who we are. You are a product not only of your choices and decisions, but also of the systems built around you, whether it's through the public education system or the culture you lived in or the family you come from. All of those things help shape and form you. All these experiences that you've had over the course of your life so far are connected to making you the person that you are today. And so whether it's the trauma or the good work ethic, whatever it is, they all have links back to other things in your life that you've come across that help shape and form you. And that part of the Christian teaching is that we are all being shaped and formed into something or somebody. Ideally, it's Jesus. But in the case for Daniel and his friends, yeah, they've been shaped and formed from this point by their Hebrew training as young boys, right? They know the law of God is what we're going to see later on. And they know their God, specifically Yahweh. But as they're stripped from their homeland and they're brought into the king's palace, into a pagan system, they're going to be disciples of something else now. And ultimately, what you'll see is this tension of how do you live in a world where you are a child of God. That's your main identity. How do you live in a world that's a child of God while also having the world try to shape and form you into something else? Right? In a sense, Babylon is deforming Daniel and his friends, or at least they're going to try. And this book sets up the tension I think a lot of us feel in our lives is we know we're children of God. We are disciples of Jesus. We're trying to follow him and become more like him day by day. But this world is also trying to deform us from that. It's trying to take those parts of us, our identity in Christ, away from us and give us a new identity. And so we have to wrestle through, okay, how how do I navigate this? How do I navigate this at my new job or at college or in this relationship that I'm pursuing? A couple questions that kind of came to my mind as I was reading through this text was, what are you taking in? Right? So for King Neb, he's taking in these Hebrew boys. That's going to affect his kingdom. He doesn't realize it yet, but that is going to affect his kingdom later on, as we'll see. For Daniel and his friends, they're taking in all the Babylonian education system. That's going to do something if they're not aware of it. That's going to have an effect on you. Honestly, this kind of comes back to the public education system. This is why a lot of Christian families choose not to put their kids in the public education system, is because regardless of what you think, the public education system isn't built on solid Christian understanding of what it means to be a human. It's built on the world's understanding of what it means to be a human. It's built on the world's vision of sexuality when it comes to those topics. It comes to the world's vision for health and for what a good life is. And a lot of that is detached from who God is. And so for Christian families who choose to opt out of that, they put their kids in a private Christian school, or they homeschool, and they try to give their kids a Christian education where God is at the center of everything. He's at the center of math, of science, of literature. Everything revolves around him. We're going to see a little bit of what that looks like in someone's life through Daniel and his friends. Another question is, who is teaching you? So for Daniel and his friends, the Babylonians are going to be teaching him, or him and his friends. Who's teaching you? Who do you have in your life who is influencing what you will become? Right? I think it's critical, especially as a young person, to have a solid mentor in your life. Mentor two. Right? And there will be seasons in your life maybe where you exchange one mentor for another. Right? I went through a few mentors in my life for different seasons of my life. Essentially, who is teaching you? Because who is teaching you is ultimately who you're going to become. And ideally, back to a line I quoted earlier in one of the earlier episodes of the podcast, Paul has that line, follow me as I follow Christ. You want to follow someone, you want to be mentored by someone who is being mentored by Jesus. You want to become like Jesus? Follow someone who's following Jesus. Easiest way. You don't want to follow Jesus? Follow someone who's not following Jesus, and you'll become like that. The last question is, where does your identity lie? Daniel and his friends are going to be wrestling with this throughout the book of who ultimately do they belong to. And so the question needs to be posed to you. Who do you belong to? Where are you pulling your ultimate source of comfort and satisfaction from? Where are your deepest desires coming from in this life? When you walk into your workplace or your college or your church or your school, whatever it is, your family, what are you coming from? Are you coming from a rooted identity in the person and work of Jesus, or are you coming from insecurity? Are you coming from the world systems of what they told you that you were? All right? That's it for this episode of the Freight Podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope this is going to be a good series for you. And yeah, hit the subscribe button. We are now on YouTube, and so check out the YouTube channel. Dive into the Book of Daniel with us. Check out the Hot Takes episodes. We're going to continue doing those. And ideally, you, through this podcast, grow to become more and more like Jesus each and every day. That is the goal. That is the aim. And to do so in the tensions and the struggles of life. As always, thank you for listening, and we will see you next time.